You're listening to the Racer to Racer podcast presented by Race 92. Race 92 is a vintage-inspired racing apparel brand specializing in celebrating vintage race culture and adapting to motorsports today. Check out race92.com for all your racing merchandise needs. I'm your co-host, Aaron Mack. To other co-hosts, you may have seen walking out of a great clips with a big old smile on his face. You've probably seen him at a dirt track, or most recently, you've seen him at the Grand Prix St. Petersburg streets of I can't even talk right now. You've seen him the St. Petersburg IndyCar race. And I tell you one place you didn't see him coming out of a Walmart with some sunscreen.
No, you did not. You did not. I carefully avoided all sunscreen.
Yep, that is.
I like to get a nice base.
Right. So before I say anything else, just want to thank everyone for watching and listening. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and make sure you like the video. Also, check us out on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And Scott's cat is telling you to do the same thing as well.
That's right. He's telling you that, hey, listen and subscribe.
Yep.
Quit screwing around.
Please listen. We'll give a quick shout out to our friends at racercollect.com. Patrick Patton, great guy. Like we said, great, collectibles, racing collectibles. A lot come straight from the drivers, so definitely check them out. But yeah, so obviously, as people can tell if they're watching on YouTube, you were just in Florida for the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg and cheering on a good friend of the show, Jagger Jones, the USF 2000 race.
I was. It was a great time, and we enjoyed it. Jagger... first day, ran 8th. He was back in 10th. There was a crash last lap. He picked up those 2 spots. But he had actually qualified 5th for that race. Sunday he qualified 4th. And he ran 3rd. And he got his first podium. So he was very excited. His family was very excited. And it was a good weekend. First thing I have to do is I got to give a shout out to the gentleman, I didn't even know his name, who handed me back my wallet last night at the airport in Orlando. I left it laying on the arm of a seat I was sitting at, and I got up and I left it laying there. And that gentleman was kind enough to grab it and walk over and hand it to me. And sir, I know you'll never listen to this, but thank you very much.
All your money was in there. Everything was intact.
Well, I don't carry cash anymore because you got to have cash to carry it. But no, everything was intact. He was a very kind man, and I really appreciate his kindness. And just you getting up, you're getting ready to go, and I just left it laying there, and and he was so kind to bring it to me. But yeah, so it was a great weekend. Man, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch too much IndyCar action. While I was there, some of it was just being lazy on Saturday. I missed qualifying. We were going to go about 9 o'clock in the morning. I didn't get there till whenever qualifying officially ended, and everything was done for the day. But that's how it happens sometimes when you're dealing with me. But it was a good time. Really enjoyed it. I was really happy for Jagger. He got to meet another friend of the show for the first time. Oddly enough, you would think that he would have already known him, but Mario was right next to the victory lane doing the 2-seater meet and greets and at the Rudolph Mortgage 2-seater tent. And Jagger went over and introduced himself, and he got a great photo with Mario. So it was great weekend. It really was. And Scott Mclaughlin gets his first win. How about that?
Yeah, he was obviously super excited. And I know, last year, I mean, he had a decent season, but I don't think it was the results that he wanted. And a lot of people are questioning if, he'd be back with Penske, whatever. So, it's a good way to start out the season for sure.
Yeah, it really was.
And, pull and win. Yeah.
Yeah, and Will Power had a good day. I know he was upset at Jimmy Johnson because Jimmy was holding up Scott and a couple other cars trying to let Alex catch up. But, a lot of people are already saying it's deja vu all over again for Joseph Newgarden as he starts the season out with a rough start. and he's down in the finishing order, and he's going to make a late charge in the season. He always does, and a lot of people are just thinking, boy, is it going to happen again where he's going to come up short when a couple of bad races early?
Right. Yeah, I mean he's definitely he'll definitely be in the mix at some point. I feel like it's Joseph Newgarden.
Well,
I would
exactly.
hope,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I want to give another shout out to Mark Janes, who I actually left right after the USF 2000 race, right before the IndyCar race. On Sunday, we headed back to the Orlando area, and that's where we were flying out of. And we listened to the IndyCar radio network, or the IMS radio network, however you want to say it, and on our ride back. And they did a magnificent job as always. And it's really the way I prefer to listen to IndyCar races. Actually, I mean, I like watching them, but I really enjoy that crew.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, Mark definitely does a great job. I mean, the whole
Yeah,
operation does, but Mark's obviously the
absolutely. It's top notch.
yeah. So, and speaking of voices of the 500, so our show today, it's a guest that we've had on before, but we definitely wanted to have him back on. And actually, when we had him on, he did the tribute to Al Unser, which we released a while ago. And obviously that was back in December. So we talked to obviously Paul Page. We talked to him back in December, but we're now just getting to release it. And yeah, always great to catch up with them. It's kind of like a part two. We talked about a lot of things we didn't talk about before, obviously. Yeah, it's just I mean, we could have Paul Page on every week and never get tired of talking to him.
Yeah, Paul's such a Paul could be whatever with his time, right?
Yeah.
He could say, "No, I've already done all that. I don't want to talk or whatever." But he really is a racer at heart, and he loves talking racing, and he loves talking Indy cars, and we're just so lucky to be able to get him on. And we had a great time talking to him. Christmas time, and again, like Aaron pointed out, he was so kind to do a little thing on Al, and yeah, and it was, yeah, I really enjoyed talking to Paul, and I can't wait to see him in person in May and talk to him a little bit in May, and yeah, I really don't know what else to say besides I really enjoyed it. It was a great time as always.
Well, hopefully you'll have some sunscreen on in May.
Yeah, hopefully, right, or at least a hat. Maybe I could get a hat. I don't like wearing hats though.
Oh, so in our so we'll say who our guest is going to be next week. And this is another one we recorded back in December. Pat Sullivan, who I'll let you talk a little bit about him, Scott, because he's more in your wheelhouse.
Pat is an announcer for he does a lot of work in the Midwest. Typically, he announces at USAC events. He announces at Sonoma Raceway. He does announcing out there. He is in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame for his announcing work. He does other local races in Indiana, like Bloomington Speedway and Putnamville. Just kind of all over. And he's such a good guy. He's a very intelligent man. And Pat is someone I've known, but I don't know, right? If that makes sense.
Mm.
He's an acquaintance, and this was the first time I really had a chance to really talk to him, and I really enjoyed it, and it was boy, he's a nice man, and he came on and did our Chili Bowl live broadcast after doing this, and he would do live check-ins, and
Yeah, how
uh,
great was that?
Pat's a great man, and like I said, he is in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame for announcing, and well deserved. And he is a historian in many ways of the sport. He's also a writer. He writes for Sprint Car Midget Magazine, and man, I just don't know what else I can say other than he's a great guy.
Yeah, and when we have a lot of these, historic announcers, and we have at least one more that we're going to, well, actually, technically two announcers that we're going to be releasing that we haven't talked about yet. It's just there's just voices that when you think about a certain type of racing or certain event, you kind of think about a voice that goes with it, and Pat Sullivan definitely is one of those voices. I mean, especially if you watch Flow Racing. I mean, it's just one of those iconic voices. It's very distinct, and it's him.
Yeah, Pat does too. He's a very distinctive voice, and he and Brad Dickerson, when they work together, they have such a great rapport and such a great chemistry. They really feed off each other. And Pat also does a lot of stuff at Indianapolis Raceway Park. You can find him in a lot of places, and I'm sure once people hear his voice, more than likely they've heard Pat before. And yeah, I mean, he's such a good dude, and really excited to release that one next week. And we were so excited to talk to Paul, like we said earlier. And he was having to get off because he was wrapping Christmas presents, and it's like, oh, one more question, one more question. And he's like, I gotta go. So, um, with Paul, he's just a
Yeah.
funny guy. And he's got great stories.
And he always has time. And the thing that I really admire about Paul is he's like, I got to go. And we ended the thing, and he's like, is that good for the Allen's tribute? Or want me to do more? I was like, man, he's just so just so generous with his time.
And he's a professional,
Yeah.
and that at the bottom line is, no matter what, he takes so much pride in what he has done and does. And I think I know I could learn a lot from him when it comes to that.
And it's so easy. It's easy to talk to a lot of people we interview, but a professional like that, it makes it flow so much easier. Because I do that for a living.
I agree, and I think too, if you just want to look at, I mean, like if you just look at our views on our shows, Paul by far is one of the most viewed
Yeah.
shows that we've had, and segments that we've had. And I think that just is a testament to what you kind of said. Like he's got that voice and he's very familiar, and people really are interested in what he has to say. And you earn that. You don't. That's earned. That isn't given.
We get so many comments, and actually, someone commented on the first one like a week or two ago, the first interview we did with Paul, and they said you really need to consider having him back on the show because he's just a great guy. And I think I commented and I said, stay tuned. So if you're that person, there you go. But no, we appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's funny, right? Well, yeah, this one's for you, man.
Right.
Sad news today. I don't know if you heard this or not. You probably have. The passing of the Flying Hawaiian Danny and Gaius, man. Wow.
Yeah, I guess he passed away. I think a couple days ago. I think on Saturday. I think somebody said
Yeah.
like congestive
Today
heart
today
failure.
was
But
like the first time I'd heard of it, and it was the first time I kind of seen it. And so if people saw it yesterday or whatever, I apologize. I've been off the grid a little bit, but um, man, how about that guy? He was another guy that fans loved. Just a little star-crossed, especially when it comes to Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
and someone who got
Um,
very hurt in a crash. And
they got hurt twice there.
yeah, but
You know,
he's missing part. I think they had to shorten part of his leg, right? Because one of his legs was longer than the other.
and that may be. I don't remember that part of it.
Because they talk about in rapid response.
Yeah, and that's very possible, and it's. I think actually we talked about it with Dr. Alvey too,
Yeah.
but we didn't get in depth with it. And the photos from that crash. The front of the car is gone, and his shoe is
Feet
smoking
are
when it
just
comes to
dangling.
arrest.
Feet are just
And it's
dangling.
just,
Yeah.
man, it's hard to believe when you look at that and that man survived that, and I hate that he's gone. I hate it when we lose our history like that, and because with them goes so much knowledge and so many stories, um and those things are just today it's better because of things like this and video, but it's not like hearing it from the real person, right? I mean, right in front of you. And, gosh, you know, Bobby Unser stories are the best when Bobby Unser tells them, right? You know what I'm saying? And the same thing, I'm sure, for all of us. And so, Godspeed to Danny and guys. You are missed and will be missed.
Absolutely. I think another thing worth mentioning is the NASCAR race at Fontana this this past weekend. And I think maybe some people, I don't know, I really didn't, but some people thought maybe Kyle Larson was slowing down a little bit because obviously he didn't have the Chili Bowl that everyone thought he would have. But he's not
Yeah,
slowing down.
I mean
So
the guy goes like his longest losing streak in what years, which was like I don't know what was like 6 months, and that's only because of winter, right? I mean, or
right.
4 months, or like 19 races or whatever that number was. I forget what they put out there, and it's just like, oh, okay, he's not Superman. You're not going to win everything. Little controversy in that. Chase Elliott fans not happy, and I gotta tell you, I can kind of see why. I mean, he moved over, pitched him in the fence. Not quite sure why he did it, but he did it. And I don't blame Chase Elliott for being mad one bit. And I'm a giant Carl Larson fan. People are going back to what happened at the Clash. I felt like that one wasn't quite as egregious as maybe Fontana, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when you start doing that, you get paid back at some point. Like that you run people in the fence or you get somebody up in the fence, that's coming back to you at some point. That's
Yeah.
that's just how it's going to be. And Elliott, I think what broke something when he got in the fence, I believe. I didn't watch the race obviously, but I watched some of the highlights and he was talking about it. Broke something in the right side. So as far as Kyle Larson winning, man, that's awesome. I think you're going to see Chase. I don't know. There's this weird thing with Chase Elliott. I feel like I think he's so loved by some people that you got a whole nother group of people that just love to see him not win or not do well. And that's going to be really interesting because Chase Elliott's not going to take getting pushed around like that
No,
by anybody.
no,
So
absolutely not.
that's setting up a really interesting rest of the season for sure.
By the way, speaking of NASCAR, have you seen the commercial with Chase Briscoe and Tony Stewart, the Mahindra farm equipment?
Yeah,
I love that.
that's
He
pretty
says
good.
something. Yeah, he says something about a goat, and Stewart's just like, "I am the goat."
Right. He calls him an old goat, and he's like, I am the goat. No,
Yeah,
that's well done. And great
yeah,
marketing, right? I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
we need more of that. And I will say this, man, is as far as Tony Stewart goes, he's had some pretty good commercials over the years showing his humor. Um, so
Yeah,
I mean, he's
some commercials are just, I don't know. You just get like kind of like it's just put off vibe. Like I don't know. It's just it's for show and it's just fake. Well, I mean it's fake, but I don't know. With that, like it just feels natural. Like it's the humor just felt natural. It didn't seem corny. Like it just seemed natural and it was
right.
hilarious. I just really enjoyed that commercial.
Yeah, there is a real subtlety to it, especially
Yeah.
to humor, right? I mean,
Hmm.
humor can either hit its target or it can just miss badly, and there's not much in between. So, and you got to walk a fine line when you're doing commercial humor because you can't get too far out there when you're trying to sell tractors or whatever.
Right.
But I felt like they hit a pretty good sweet spot
Yeah.
there, and like I said, Tony's has been great at commercials his entire career. I mean, really, if you look at his commercials, are always a lot of them have humor in them, and he's good. He's got good timing. He's got good comedic timing, and he
Yeah.
does in person as
That's a
well.
lot
I
of it.
mean, he
Right.
he can really, he can kind of, you really kind of play the dozens with you a little bit, and and he's got kind of a sharp tongue, so he can kind of cut you up a little bit without being too hateful. You can tell it's in jest, and because he's got good comedic timing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think that's all the news. So, without any further ado, we'll jump right into Paul Page. I think everyone,
yeah, everybody,
will enjoy
thank you
it,
so much. Yeah, everybody, please enjoy it. We sure did, and I just hope everybody has a great week.
Yep, and make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already, and definitely stay tuned for the coming weeks as we have a lot more great interviews we're going to be releasing. So our guest today is another one of our returning guests. We were honored to have him on several months ago. He was one of our first guests, first 10 or so. Former voice of the Indianapolis 500, Paul Page. Paul, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always an honor to talk to you.
Glad to be here.
We were just talking before this. If you guys haven't already, make sure you pick up Hello, I'm Paul Page. It's race day in Indianapolis. And where can people buy the book, Paul, if they want to get it?
It just sold out at Amazon. It is available at Auto Books, Arrow Books in Burbank, California. A lot of people know where that is. It's got all the great racing books. And Barnes & Noble online still has them. And if you're in Indianapolis, the Barnes & Noble stores. So, but I think the most solid contact, and they're all signed, is Arrow Books, Auto Books, Arrow Books. Sorry.
Right.
What kind of reception have you got on this? I mean, has it been what you hoped, or has it been better than you hoped?
I'm surprised. It's much better than I hoped. My objective was to just tell you about my life and my favorite part of my life, starting with the 1960 Indy 500, and use that history kind of as the frame, and then wind in my own personal stories in that. And when the second book sold, I was happy. So yeah, it's a work of love, and I just wanted to do it.
How many personal appearances do you think you've done related to this book?
Oh my God, I don't have any idea, but they're all fun. Everybody wants to sit and talk about this story and that story, and it turns into this giant session, and I really enjoy that. In fact, I did one at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum, and they finally came over and kind of drugged me out of it. Said, you big crowd here where people like to see the exhibits too.
So we talked to you like a little bit earlier this year, and first of all, we want to say again, thank you so much. Your videos have been our most watched videos.
Yeah.
By far.
I love talking racing. I mean, come on, it's my passion.
And
yours too.
So yeah, and thank you so much for just being so kind to pick up the phone anytime that we call.
Enough. Thank you.
And so what did you think of this last season? How it all turned out? Because when we talked, we were still kind of in the heat of the battle.
I was pleased with the way it turned out. I was pleased that it was fought so vigorously right down to the end. Of course, I think you guys know I have a family interest in Colton Herta because my son's on his team as a performance engineer. And man, at Nashville, I was like, Colton, what are you doing? He had the race won, but he always has to go 110%, and that kind of bit him that day. But yeah, it was a great season. I loved every minute of it. And speaking of Nashville, it was so cool what happened down there and all the crowds. And I mean, we now know they had all the plans out. The plans were working, but they just totally underestimated the popularity of the event. And there was some, crowding problems and stuff like that, but they're very good problems to have, and they'll solve them.
You've been to so many of those types of events, these street courses that come in with a lot of hopes and dreams, and man, this is going to be the big thing. And then, after a race, maybe two, they're kind of gone. Yeah. And like you were talking about Nashville, what was the impression you got there? Because my impression was track could use a little work, but
Yeah.
they kind of got the tough part in getting the fans interested.
Yeah, they well, you're right about the track, and they know it. And they the pits, to my way of thinking, are a pretty big issue. And the way they had the timing lines on the exit of the pits, that was kind of strange. And they did have a lot of issues in the pits, but kind of typical of racers. Racers just all figured out around it and got the job done. There was some areas that I thought were maybe a little too narrow, and they ought to really expand it. I love the fact that there are right angle turns, because that's where passes happen. With regard to the crowd, I only know a little bit. I wasn't there. I watched it on television, and I heard like the 3-day ticket they built on race morning, so they were a little behind on all of that. But yeah, that's especially with street races. I think most people don't have a clue as to really how hard they are to get done. And I just think of television, you're snaking cables over the tops of buildings and down alleyways, and everything about them is incredibly complex. And you're talking on that. Well, think about just the insurance, the liability. How do I come to your store and say, hey, we're going to shut it down for a week? Is that okay with you?
Right.
So it takes a lot to work it out, and they usually reward us with great races, though.
One thing I've really admired about you, Paul, I would say that within the past year, I've noticed, like, I've been to some different events. I went to the I think it was the LEO. Oh, what was it? It was Grand Prix weekend, and it was outside the main gate of IMS. I forget what it was. What was that? They were unveiling something.
I was there. I remember. But let me see. That wasn't
because the ticket. Were you at the ticket? Were you at the ticket unveiling in PRI this past weekend?
Yeah, no, I was not.
Or 2 weekends ago, whenever that was.
The Halio thing was at the front gate, right?
I forget what it was so that they were doing.
Yeah, and Roger
it was a milk
there
bottle
and everything.
Thing. I think it was something with the milk bottle.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was saying was,
anyhow, Elio was there, and he's a 4-time champion. That's all I needed.
And I've always noticed, like, I mean, you're just you don't see that with other former broadcasters. No. I mean, there's a lot of broadcasters that they just do the 500 because basically they're told they have to. And with you, obviously, there's a passion, and that's something that I've always I've started to notice more since we've talked to you. And we know you now,
Mm-hmm.
So I've noticed you more at events. But I saw you also at the autonomous race.
Yes, right.
What I mean, that was that your first time ever going to a race like that?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I'd never seen that before, and my son and I were together for that, and we fortunately the black and gold people let us come in and drink some of their Coca-Cola and everything, and then the view from the suites. And I tell this to everybody. I said, "Oh, I want to watch the race from the suites." It's not the greatest view in the world if you're on the Gasoline Alley suites. So we went up top and watched from the grandstand, and it was interesting. Interesting to see some of the mistakes in advanced programming, like the potential winner went one lap wrong, and cars turning into the pit wall. Not the greatest result, but it tells you where some things are going. I don't think I'd ever go to a real race of them. I understand they're trying side-by-side racing this weekend or last weekend. Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I watched a little bit of that, and it was it didn't do much for me because there wasn't really any passing or anything, so it was a little different. But no, it's cool to see. And speaking of that, I was having a discussion, I think, with my dad. We were talking about just how many different forms of racing you've been a part of with broadcasting. What is the weirdest racing that you've ever been involved with on the broadcasting? Like, didn't you do like lawnmower racing at some point or something like that?
No, I was in one at the Speedway.
You were in one, okay.
We raced the lawnmowers before they got the golf carts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was pulled around by tractors, little mini tractors, and we had a race of that. And I think we barely had enough fuel to go 2.5 miles. So, and it was like an hour to get around the whole speedway. But yeah, well, the weirdest race, and I do want to tell you about this because it wasn't a car race. It was during the baseball strike back in the 80s, and I was working with NBC at the time, and we were the baseball network. And so when the strike came on, we had nothing. And the president said, you're going to still have to fill those hours. So NBC bought like everything that was out there. That's where I ended up doing a lot of motocross and stuff like that. But one of the races I got to do is called the Arcata to Ferndale Kinetic Sculpture Race. Now there is a race. So here's the deal. You build some item that you call a sculpture that has to be able to move. And then you have a 3-day race. There are no rules. In fact, it is, they want you to break the rules, creatively though. And so one of the sculptures was called the Bedroom Bordello. And it had fancy lights on it, like in New Orleans, gas lamps and everything. And there were 4 beautiful women sitting on there, gowns and all that. And there were 4 guys in tuxes pushing it. Now that's the rule. You can use however many member to push it as you have on it. And at the beginning of each day, they parachuted gin fizzes to them on the beach. This is up in Northern California, which explains a great deal of it. But that was the weirdest ever. And first time I'd ever been offered a joint by a deputy sheriff. So,
that's funny.
Unusual races. Wow. Because I like racing across the board to sort of label one. Oh, okay, yeah. The ice motorcycle races in Assen in the Netherlands, where they have like the 6-inch spikes on the wheels and everything, and those guys are certifiable. Actually, they don't get hurt all that much considering what they're doing, but learning about the bike and the primary motorcycle time was Jawa, and meeting those guys and being still an international community, and Austin is one of the big motorcycling places in the world. So that was fun. I'd seen it once on like Wide World of Sports or something years before. Right. And to be there and actually see it and be part of it and interview guys and do the play-by-play, that was fun, but took a lot of work to figure out exactly what the game was, what the strategies had to be.
Right. And well, it's really funny, and something I've noticed recently, so before I started dating my girlfriend, she knew nothing about racing. I still remember her telling me that we were going to go on vacation somewhere on Memorial Day weekend. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. But anyway, I'll
Do you have her straightened out now?
Right. Oh yeah. No, she loves it now. And we kind of talked about it on the last podcast with Paul Scott about how, I think you were talking about Chin, bringing him to the track for the first time, and how everyone just, once you're there, you just kind of get hooked. But anyway, I'll have conversations with her about different forms of racing. I'll pull up a video on YouTube, and it's so funny recently, every time I've done that and we've watched something, it's you doing the broadcasting. I'm like, oh, we know that voice.
That poor girl.
And that just shows how iconic you are with motorsports in general. And it's really cool. It always makes me smile whenever, I turn on a video and, we hear your voice. I mean, NHRA, and actually one of my favorite ones is when you did rally. I'm a big rally fan of Travis Pastrana. And there was a line that you said, it's just like those little lines that get you. And it was at the, I think it was LA Coliseum. And you said something along the lines of, and number 199 is all you need to know, something, Travis Pastrana. And that still resonates with me. It's just, those cool little, and it's like when you say something like that, is that something you plan out, or does it just kind of come to you?
No, I don't plan anything. When I go into the booth, I have basically a to-do list, and it's made up in descending order of importance. So I set that on the table, and they are things that I want to make sure I get in the broadcast, and they are in descending order of importance because I need to let's say I want to say something really great about Colton Herta. But I might get in trouble because he might crash. So I need to get all the really important stuff out earlier on, anticipating that there might not be a chance to get them on later. So that's and after that, I just start talking.
I know we talked about this a little bit last time you were on, and we are talking about Sid and just how the disciples of Sid, how they describe things, and I know I said this last time, but instead of saying something's light blue, it's robin egg blue or whatever the color is, and have you been able to use that? Is that something you were able to take across the board with all the different things that you've done?
No, because when you get to television, that's not as important.
Okay.
You remember, if you're doing your job right in television, you're complementing the video. The video is the primary. And so you're following the video as opposed to radio where you are the lead all the time. And when you're doing television, I don't know where the producer is going to go next. And often after he's done it, I'm not sure why. But sometimes, the job is to put that in some sort of continuity. And then the key part of the play-by-play job really is to set up the analyst to do their good work. Because, that's it's like, I see he's not on anymore, but I had given anything to work with Paul Tracy, and I had some pretty good analysts myself. So, but yeah, it's entirely different, the two different disciplines.
Yeah, Paul is one of a kind, I think, in many ways.
And I hope that's good.
Oh, I think it is. I think, he is who he is, and he's unapologetic about it. I mean, and that, speaking of which, Hinchcliffe coming in the booth, and and we've seen him do it a little bit in the past, as someone who's done that job. I mean, not really give a critique of him, but I think he's just such a natural at it.
Yeah, it really was. And in that role, okay, and Paul was very good at it. You need an analyst who is not encumbered some way. I had that with Johnny Rutherford for a while, and he's one of my best friends. But his deal was he was doing analyst work, but he was still racing. So he's not going to say anything controversial. He doesn't want to screw up a potential corporate relationship or a ride somewhere. So while he was still racing, it was really kind of tough with him. Once he wasn't racing and he didn't worry about those potential allegiances, then he was fine. Bobby Unser, of course, never cared. He didn't say anything about anybody anytime. And he, we laugh about him a lot about Uncle Bobby, but he also did tell you an awful lot about the technology of the sport. He didn't do that really well at first, but he got much better at it.
Right.
And let's see.
Yeah,
Parker was good.
Yeah, Parker was great.
Yeah. So
Bobby, I think he's such an easy target because he gave it out so much that he made it made people want to give it back to him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Me being one of them. Every chance I got.
Right. And
the good thing was he had a super sense of humor. And so you could do those things with him. You could play practical jokes on him and everything. Sometimes you get somebody sitting next to you that's like taking it so seriously, and excuse me, this is fun. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself here.
Yeah, I know. You told the story last time about when they put him on top of the suites off of 2 at the Speedway.
He was mad.
But those really are, in my opinion, like when those eventually get knocked down and rebuilt, they won't rebuild them where they're at. And I don't think
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you're right that's a terrible accident zone. And the first big hint we got of that was Rasmussen and Sneva.
Right.
And so I don't know. I also don't think Roger has any plans of taking them down anytime soon.
I hope not, because that's one of the greatest secrets in auto racing right there is those suites.
But you can, if you look at a lot of the photos of accidents in there, almost always too, you see fans going, getting way back, especially with like Sneva, because there was a flash fire in that, and that's hot. And I don't think a lot of times people, especially with a fuel that burns where you can't really see it, realize how really hot it is. So, and you're talking earlier about rally. When I was in SCCA and doing a lot of stuff, which I did before I got my job in radio, because now I didn't have the weekends available. But I was a rallyist and a gymkhana guy. I had a Fiat 124 Spider, and I used to love to rally. And I would, when I started doing the coverage of rallying, I would have liked to have been driving in one of these performance rallies, and but we did mostly the follow the hints kind of rallying. It was good.
Yeah. Sorry, Scott. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was just waiting for you. No, I just, it's so funny. Like, like auto racing is such a funny thing, because it, like when we see the Rossi now, so many people thought Rossi was just in this one box, and now he's out doing the Baja and seems to really love the Baja thing.
Yeah, he does.
And I think that's because that type of racing has given him a freedom that he never really had before.
I think that's probably a good analysis. And by the way, talking about my racing, just to get it back on me. No,
sure.
You mentioned Rossi. I drove the Baja several times. That's one of the posters.
That's right. Who was your co-driver?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I love doing that. Let's see. Take this down without breaking it. Let's see if I can actually show. Let's see, where is the name? Because I did it with my son, BC6. Oh my goodness. Oh, here we are. Down here, that's me, and it was fun. And the BC cars were these kind of cars. They had a Porsche engine. They had great navigation and great radios. Let me put this back. There we go. Yeah, but we were talking Rossi, and one of the things about the Baja is it does give you a lot of freedom, and he obviously likes that, and he's so incredibly skilled. I mean, he's a racer can really race anything. He may have to, like Jimmy Johnson, might take him a little while to figure it out, but once they do, get out of their way. And things like the Baja do give you, it's a great time to do that race. It's really a lot of fun to do. Except when you come there, one of the warnings they give you, when I was a rookie there. Now, if you're coming up on a rise or something, and there's a whole bunch of spectators there, slow down. Because when you go over the rise, there may be a refrigerator in the middle of the road or something like that. And it's true, but it's, that's part of that game. And going along the goat trail where it's the width of your car and you really are hugging the wall. So yes, I mean, everything about it's challenging except the silt. I hate the silt. I got stuck in it about 3 times and not fun to dig out of.
You've seen the video of Rossi jumping over that car, and he didn't even know it was there. He afterwards just, I didn't even know it was there.
Yeah, well, and it required the skills of a Rossi to avoid something bad there too, didn't it?
Yeah.
Rossi's cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Hopefully, he kind of gets the IndyCar program kind of turned around. I know he's pretty disappointed, and I probably would be too. But and really, when you look at Andretti, I mean, Colton was really the only strong one this year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And of course, you're going to see a lot of changes
mhm.
there for next year. But I look at what they were doing this year, and sometimes you just get bit. I mean, you can have the best car and the finest crew, and still your luck just goes to the devil sometimes. So, and I think that's what happened to him this year. None of his issues were necessarily his issues, but he had to write them out. It's kind of like Formula One a week ago, huh?
Yeah, right.
You never did you ever do Formula One broadcasting at all?
I did. I did Caesar's Palace Grand Prix, and I did Long Beach. Yeah, I did my analyst for Caesar's Palace Grand Prix the second year. First year I did it was Jody Scheckter, and the second year I did it was none other than Roger Penske. He was my analyst for show, so I always say he works for me. I don't say that to his face, of course.
You're one of the very few humans that can say that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's it's kind of funny. Last 2 years ago, he was recognized by the National Association of Sportscasters, and I had to do part of the presentation for it. And he was being recognized, sportscaster. So if he was a sportscaster, which I accept, not debating that, but his big deal was with me. So I feel pretty good about it. He does, a month of May here, he does a lot of television, and he hasn't done quite as much since he bought the Speedway, but yeah, he knows his television. And so, okay.
Yeah, I don't, people, I mean, my age or younger, especially the younger people, don't really realize how accomplished Roger has been at this sport. So many different levels. I mean, as a driver, like few people realize, what a great race car driver he truly was.
Oh yeah, he could have been a great champion, as you well know. But he had to make a decision for his life. He had to look ahead, and so he walked away from a driver's position. He's also the first guy, to my knowledge, that ever really figured out sponsorship. I think it was Xerox that he put on his sports car, and everybody's like, "What's that?" Roger got a few bucks from somebody to help his racing. So yeah, and he's always bright. He's always looking for a different way, a new way, and also he thinks a lot of other people and what they will like. When he owned at Fontana, one of the things he did for the campers, they dropped off your newspaper every morning. That's Roger. When we had the news conference announcing him as the new owner of the Speedway, for the first time ever, there was like a silver service tray with coffee and tea and everything laid out by the windows in the media center there. That's Roger. It's those little touches. He's really, really good at it.
Actually, there's a lot of old. I've seen a lot of old average. You're talking about I'm sorry. What was the sponsor you said was on his old sports car?
I think it was Xerox.
Yep, I think you're right.
Was it? Am I right? I don't know.
Yeah. What was that though? What was Xerox back in the? I mean, the same
Xerox was like copy.
I only think of it as a copier, but I don't think.
I mean, they had copy. I'm gonna sound like an idiot, but they had copy machines like that in the '60s.
Oh, whatever. We probably get Wikipedia and we know right now.
I know. I'm just trying to think. I wasn't here, so I don't know. But I've seen a lot of old advertisements of. There's a lot actually of like Roger and the Xerox car. I think it is.
Oh right, yeah.
And yeah, no, I mean,
I know there's somebody out there watching this saying, "You idiots!"
Yeah,
everybody.
That's right.
I'm gonna have to look this up while we're doing this because I
feel like most of the people calling me an idiot would be people who really know me well.
Yeah.
So
people have corrected us a couple times in the comments.
Yes, and well deserved. Speaking of Roger, and I think what goes to his humanity, like you were talking about, was they had a tribute for Robin Miller there, which at one time that was not always the best relationship. Although I think there was respect there always, but it wasn't always the greatest relationship.
Yeah. At at that memorial, Roger was sitting across the aisle from me. And I kept kind of glancing at him because, you wonder, is this just pro forma or what? And he both, and Mark Miles sitting next to him, both seemed to be affected by it. So, yeah, he certainly knew how Robin was as a writer. He was going to tell it like it was. And a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't want to get embroiled. But Robin was true to himself the whole time.
Roger did get the last laugh when he bought the Speedway, and Robin had no idea it was happening.
Robin didn't know. It was so good. He overslept.
I don't think anyone, a lot of people didn't know. I remember.
Nobody knew.
Right. I remember talking to Simon because it was a SEMA, and SEMA that year was right when Roger bought it. It was right before SEMA. And I talked to Simon because he was doing an appearance. I'm like, did you know? He's like, I knew 5 minutes before they announced it. So it's crazy.
Well, I like to think that I've got a pretty good back channels at the Speedway. I hadn't a clue. I knew that there was talk for several years about selling it. But almost every time that came up, it was Roger and John Menard doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So when it actually did happen, they dropped it so fast, and everything was done when they did. So they put one over on all of us, didn't they?
That's I think Roger. I would almost say Roger enjoyed that part of it as much as buying the Speedway part. The fact that they were to keep it quiet.
A couple of times when he first came in, and when we first came in, we weren't sure what it was. Even then, they hadn't handed the release out or anything yet. And Roger sits down, and I'm like in the second row, and he looks right at me and gives me this big grin. And Roger and my son share a commonality in that both of them went to Culver Academy in Indiana for summer sessions. And Roger and my son both were part of the drum and bugle corps. And Roger puts a lot of donation into the Culver Academy. But when it was first over and I just was walking into the area, he kind of leans over to me and he says, "Not bad for an old D&B guy, huh?"
That's so funny.
He's got a great sense of humor.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously I don't know him, but from everything I've heard and all the stories that you read, and that he does have a really good sense of humor. And
yeah, a lot of people are learning how tough he is to work for. I mean,
I
he's
bet.
very demanding. So
you know what he says though? He says he wants to make it tough for you to get in. He wants to make it even tougher for you to get out, though.
Yeah.
Meaning that if he's recruited you for talent, he wants you to be there for the long haul.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's got so many good people around him. Just look around. He's got Doug Bowles, the greatest race promoter ever, and he just he's smart. He's good. He knows how to pick people, and he knows how to win.
Something.
So that you don't think so that our audience doesn't think this is some sort of Roger Penske paid session. Let's talk about something else.
Well, I was going to say one thing. Another thing, kind of out of left field, was hiring Levi Jones to run the road to Indy. I mean, I shouldn't say it's out of left field. I'm not saying he's not deserving. Right. But if you were thinking about the list of candidates who's going to take that job,
yeah.
I mean, Levi Jones would not have been the guy I would have even thought about.
Yeah, but Roger's also really good at picking talent, isn't he?
That's right. That's
Pulled
exactly
up this
right.
silly kid from Bakersfield. What would he ever do?
Right.
Right.
The guy's name was Mears.
Right. Absolutely.
And really, the Roger Penske story. Sorry, Scott. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the Roger Penske story. I feel like years down the line they'll make a movie about him, because when you look at what he's done, and I mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he came to the Speedway pretty young, and he was nobody, and he just sat in the stands. And
he was there as a kid.
Right.
He loved it.
Yeah. And that's crazy.
That's probably a pretty good movie. I hope I can play myself.
Well, I can almost guarantee you they'll have your voice in it.
No, you never know.
So as we start turning the corner on this year, and we start looking forward to next year, when we hear about so much growth in the sport, and you've seen this sport at its highs and you've seen it at its lows.
Mhm.
And while I know you don't have your finger in the full pie, you have enough experience to really look at it and analyze it. And I just can't help to think that, man, at the rate they're out going right now, I mean, IndyCar is well on the
Yeah.
upswing.
Oh yeah. When we're worried about pit length because
Right.
we're going to have too many cars, that's a good worry to have.
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's kind of surprising that IndyCar takes this upswing in a time of otherwise economical turmoil. But often when you get to this kind of economy and the way it's been past couple of years, a lot of companies, big companies, look at a different way to approach their customers in some way. And then they say, hey, there's auto racing out there. And while we think the money that we need to race an IndyCar is a lot, some of them don't. So it's not really a big part of their budgets. It's discretionary budgets, and so they're in there, and that's good. That's good for everybody.
I agree. Somebody like myself who looks at everything going on, and to me, it's an uncertain economy. I mean, me personally, but I mean, you're seeing it at the corporate level as just the opposite in many ways. I mean, if you just kind of look around, corporate America appears to be spending money, and
Yeah,
they're
well, and
it's an interesting time. It really is.
well, they're leaving. Corporate America is leaving a lot of the old techniques and styles. They are looking for, especially with social media being what it is now, and so many different ways, guys like you to be able to put together a show like this. Everybody has to change their thinking, and fortunately, I think that works out for IndyCar, because if you come to an IndyCar race, especially if you come to Indy 500, you're going to come back.
Right.
Now, with that being said,
Yeah.
there's obviously a lot of, there's a lot of things going on in the world, politics. I mean, you got like the Green New
Right.
Deal, and you got, people trying to, do away with gasoline. I mean, do you have any fear about that affecting racing in the future?
No. I mean, you're never going to legislate racing. That would be nuts. If you take IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, any of them, they all build their own engines anyway.
Well, I think the fear a lot of people is that eventually it'll go to electric engines. And I don't know about you, but I want to be the same going. I know some people who said they want to go to the 500 if it was electric engines.
Yeah, well,
it wouldn't be the same.
I kind of think I wouldn't either. But yeah, auto racing with internal combustion engines, I don't have any fear for that going away, despite what happens in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And I like to think, we were talking about the autonomous racing earlier. While I heard a lot of people like, oh, I don't want to see that on our speedway and everything. Wasn't it pretty much like the founders planned it? Speedway being used again for the technological advance of the automobile. So I thought it was quite appropriate.
I did too. And that's really the thought I had on it.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, as dumb as this is going to sound, I felt that was no different than the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah, exactly. Shock absorbers, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I agree. I thought there was a beauty in that personally, of having that.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah, it is interesting. I share some of the same fears that Aaron has.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand what you're saying too. I do. It's just it is just a strange time. But I guess it's always a strange time, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it always is, isn't it?
I mean, if we looked in the 70s, at the end of the 70s, would you have ever thought auto racing would have been as big as it was in the 80s and 90s? I mean, it grew so big from a period in the 70s where it was big, but it wasn't. It was such an odd time then too.
You got it. Actually, I'm not sure I totally agree with you.
Okay.
Because the 70s, late 60s, early 70s were very successful in other ways. I mean, we actually had a car count of 92 at Indy one time. We had one over 100. I don't know if they were all real cars, but I do remember teams being under a dining fly working out in the back of the garage area.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it was successful. From my point of view, during that time, you really enjoyed it because you had a bunch of different tactics that you could play with. You could play, you had Goodyear and Firestone both there. You had all the engines going. The Offie was going out, the Cosworth's coming in the late 70s. So to me, that was a very successful time as well. And of course, Speedway, you always have the enormous crowds. And the championship trail at that time started to actually be something. You remember that era? They were going to Phoenix twice, Milwaukee twice, which I wouldn't mind going back to some races twice myself. They didn't have any real television until about 77, meaning on the road. So yeah, that was a success too. This is just a different kind of success. It's all good.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Aaron and I went out to the Chris Griffiths test at the Speedway to watch the Road to Indy cars. Jagger Jones is going to run USF 2000 this year. And we were out there as a guest of his. He had us come out there and he had Aaron do some filming and that sort of thing. And you talk to the car owners and you talk to the drivers and you look at those fields. I mean, and we just had Jack Miller's son on. In fact, we'll release his show this week. And I mean, those young kids, they're bringing new ways of doing things and marketing. And
yes. Wow.
And they're again, we kind of talked about a little earlier, is just they're taking the obstacles in front of them and they're finding out ways around them or over them.
Yeah.
And in that way, I think the sport's very healthy. And it seems to be a lot of drivers coming from all over to be a part of that Road to Indy, which is going to lead to IndyCar.
Yeah. Well, I know this. You're not going to find better racing in the world right now.
Yeah, I agree.
It's sometimes they do things now that that's not possible. What Rossi just did or what Paulo just did, they do some amazing things with the cars now. And considering the IndyCar is a big, heavy race car, I think the biggest surprise to most guys that are coming into it are surprised how strong they need their upper body to be able to drive one. But yeah, I'm loving this time. Listen, I only have a few more minutes. I have to wrap Christmas gifts, and I get a lot of trouble if I didn't. So
yeah, so we'll just do a quick so obviously here, so I can piece this together. All right, so obviously we've lost Al Sr. this past week. What did Al Sr. mean really mean to you and mean to racing in general, you think?
Al was the total opposite of his brother, in that Al was a thinker. If he had the right race car, he was totally unbeatable. I did find it amusing that Johnny Rutherford got to drive one of Al's cars from his early days while Johnny was in England last year for the Brightwood. And Johnny called Al and said, I don't know what's going on. Maybe they just didn't set up right, but that's one of the worst cars I've ever driven. And Al said, so see, exactly. And they wouldn't listen to me. So he had a nice sense of humor. He was quiet. Don't ever underestimate that quietness, though. He and I and Bobby had some, and Junior had some great times together. One story about Al, because he loved it, and like I say, he was subtle. He'd be in on the jokes and everything, but you'd have to. He was really good at dropping it on you quietly, and you'd stop and think, "My, did he just get me?" But we were in Belcourt, Canada, actually in the town of Sherbrooke, and we were up there to do some snowmobiling and visit the Skidoo factory. And so we went out to dinner one night, and taking us out was the publicity guy, the public relations guy who had picked us up at the flag in Chicago, and was a royal pain in the butt. Well, you can't say that to him outright. You know, he is, after all, helping out on this trip, and you're trying to promote what he's trying to promote. At least the answers were. And so we went to dinner, and the PR guy got roaringly drunk. Nice little steakhouse and everything. And so there's Al and the PR guy and Junior and Bobby and me. And at the end of the evening, and remembering we're really tired of this guy, he's picking up the check, which is why he's there. And he's so drunk, he says, "Paul, can you put the tip on this?" Yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I put a $300 tip on it. And he had to leave the next day for Chicago, so I don't know when he found out about it. But the next night we came in, the place was full, and I'll swear they were going to throw people off tables to get us back in because of that. And that was the person that saw it happen was Al, who was sitting next to me. And you can see his eyes just sparkling with that. He just loved every minute of that. And you know, he was an incredible race driver, 4-time winner. I mean, I called that 4th win. And wow, you know, it comes out of nowhere with a car that wasn't even supposed to be a race car that year. And,
he's almost lapped. Almost lapped in that race.
Right.
And you were calling it, right?
But he was, I'm sorry?
You were doing the broadcast for his 4th win, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Television for that thing. Yeah. So we're gonna miss all those guys. Think of what a terrible year this has been. We lost Bobby. We lost Bob Jenkins. We lost Robin. Now we lose Al. If you want to maybe find a bright spot out of all of that some of us have said quietly, but should be said, it's like AJ is still there. AJ Foyt is still kicking butt.
I think he's going to outlive everyone.
Yeah, he's going to.
Yep.
He's becoming the Keith Richards of motorsports. He's just going to.
That's an interesting analogy.
He's just living the way he wants to live, and
yep, always did.
Yep.
Now there was a guy I would have liked as an analyst. He'd probably beat the daylights out of me, but it might have been fun.
Well, it would have been the truth as he saw it. That's for sure. Exactly. Well, Paul, thank you so much for always picking up our calls. And it's always an honor and a pleasure. Hope to see you this year. Hope you pick up our call again next year around race time. Maybe we can talk a little bit before the race.
Anytime. I enjoy this.
I really do too. And I know Aaron does. And it's really talking to you a couple of times we have, it's just been a highlight.
Oh, good.
You know,
good.
Always a highlight. And so thank you very much.
Guys. You're good interviewers, which is important.
Well, I appreciate that. We've come a long way. The check is in the mail for that. You don't have to say those things until you cash it. But no, I'd say, Paul, it's really an honor to be able to speak with you. It
really means a lot, Paul.
You know, before we go though, because I touched on it, is the Formula One World Championship. I posted on Facebook like 10 days earlier that please don't let the Stewarts decide the World Championship. Because I saw that coming. Oh my goodness. That's almost as bad as turning the waving the green flag while the yellow lights are still on for Ari Leyendijk and Scott Goodyear. So,
right.
They're not perfect.
I really I respect Formula One. I respect the drivers. I respect the technology. I haven't always respected Formula One as a series. And it's hard for me to watch a lot of it because of that, because these guys work so hard I will say that I think if that would have went either way, either one of them deserved it. I just sorry to see that there was something that kind of clouded the end of it.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, I kind of drifted away from Formula One because it was becoming such a parade, and then with some of the technology, it wasn't all that interesting anymore. But you know who got me back on it? Mike Dunn, the director.
Really?
Yeah, we're
Really?
sitting in the booth, and every weekend he comes in. Did you see Formula One this morning? Did you see their qualifying and everything else? So just to be able to answer them, I had to start watching it, and I kind of got the bug back again.
Hey, make sure everyone, if you haven't already,
Thank you for that.
check out the book.
Take care.
Take care, Paul.
All right, thanks, Paul.